undergoing some change of late. Some of you might be aware, and some of you certainly will be aware, that we're in a team now that is now known as the Department for Organisations, Relationships and Behaviour, which includes those formerly known as SEM, Sports and Event Marketing Management, and Marketing, and Human Resource and Organisational Behaviour. So we're a newly formed team, a larger team. There's around 60 of us all told. My position in this new department is Associate Head for Student Experience. My colleague, Julia Tyrrell, can you introduce yourself?
Undergraduate course director on the marketing courses.
And it's interesting that Marina mentions that presentation that we gave 2 years ago, because that marks the kind of starting point of the journey of this particular research project. I'm really pleased to see such a ringing endorsement for teaching and learning. It's something that we're both really passionate about. It's why we got involved in this project in the first place, and also for us it helps to develop our research profile a bit more as well. The project was conceived from a partnership that we became involved with in the University of North Carolina. It's a cross-cultural project, and I'll explain a little bit more about that at the moment. We've been involved as an institution with this project for going on to 3 years now. This is our 3rd year of involvement. So we wanted to look at using this particular project as the basis and context for a further research study that we could be involved with. I'm going to take you through the first part in terms of the context, the theoretical framework that we've developed. Julia will take you through the methodology and the findings that we've got from the second phase of the research that we've undertaken, then the conclusions, and we'll share the kind of implications and questions at the end. So the context of the study is really about the global challenge that we're all facing. Global challenge in as much as business, where we are at this point in time. Constant dynamic challenge. The way that organisations now work with each other is ever more sophisticated. There are more and more forms of collaborative tools and communication that make a difference to the way that organisations interact with each other, with international partners and others around the world. And this presents all sorts of challenges for business, but also opportunities for business as well. Those teams are very much more diverse in nature. They hail from different corners of the world with different cultural experiences and different backgrounds, and that will impact too on the way that organisations work and interact with one another to bring about effectiveness in team collaborative working. Where we are, obviously, there's something in that that's incumbent on us, that we help support students in their journeys. They're to take their place as global graduates, to prepare them to become more globally diverse, to help support that business challenge. Furthermore, the challenge for us as a HE institution and the wider context is that we need to develop students' cross-cultural awareness and their competencies. This is something that was evidenced in a report produced quite recently by the British Council called the Culture at Work report. It makes it incumbent on us as HE institutions to engage students and provide opportunities for them to practice and to develop intercultural competencies, to develop those skill sets, and learning in terms of sensitivities and respect towards different others that they might become involved with, in building trust and being able to work effectively as a diverse particular team. The project that we've based this around, we feel, as a pedagogic approach, gives students the opportunity to kind of have those sorts of international experiences in a safe and supportive environment from the classroom that is very much mediated and supported by the course teams that are teaching these particular students. Overall, what we're trying to achieve is about developing and building and enhancing students that can then be fit for the global workplace. The objective of the study, we feel very much looking at other studies, and recently Julia and I presented at the HEA conference, and we came across colleagues from the University of Hertfordshire, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Lewis and Cora have got a paper that they're about to publish. A lot of other studies have looked at cross-cultural and virtual teams in the classroom using maybe 2 or 3 different cultures. We feel with our study we've kind of extended that a little further to look more broadly at a cross-cultural
many cultures, yeah,
different cultures. So the cross-cultural project itself that was conceived through the University of North Carolina. I think it's been going probably about 4 or 5 years. As I said, we've been involved for about 3 years now. There are around 40 institutions around the world from 30 different countries that participate. The students are a mix of students. They're on undergraduate and postgraduate teams. Some of them are marketing students, business students, MBA students. So it's a real cross-section of business students that participate in this particular exercise. They're tasked with the responsibility of working together in teams to produce a business plan. They're encouraged to go and find an organisation of their own choice, and that's something they do from the outset, that they have to work together on. They're given a certain guidance, shall we say, an instruction manual that gives them some information and advice about how the project will run. It gives them advice about some of the communication tools that they can use, but they're not taught, in a sense. They're not told what to do, and they're not shown what to do. A lot of this is about their own journey in learning to work with others in different cultures, different teams. The collaboration period is about 2 months from start to finish. They register, they sign up. The team at North Carolina assign the students into different project teams. So you have students working, say, in a group of 6 or 7 with other students from 6 or 7 universities from around the world. You never find any student that's in the same team as a fellow student from a fellow country, never mind from their institution. So they are all, from the outset, very, very new to each other as a diverse group of teams. This was the theoretical framework that we developed, at the heart of it looking at really the impact of cross-cultural working on global virtual teams. So we identified a number of elements from the literature that we kind of dug into a bit more detail. So a global virtual team, defined as a geographically dispersed team, working with members of diverse different cultures to collaborate on common business goals, facilitated by the use of media, computer-mediated communication. Because, I mean, I know that's sort of, 15 years old, that particular reference there, but we actually found that that was perhaps the most suited and the one that we felt best summed up the experience that we were in particular looking at. Around that, and the kind of themes that are very much evident around the literature for global virtual teams stem from culture, communications, trust, leadership and teamwork. So in a global virtual team, as distinct to a traditional team, you're obviously working with people from different cultures. That in itself presents something new and a challenge. They're people they've not met before, they're pre-awareness of, never worked with, so they have no understanding of how they will be working together going forward. But interestingly, getting to know people, the act of understanding those different cultures can itself enhance the working performance of a different project. Communication, as I mentioned previously, different forms in terms of asynchronous or synchronous communication. And these things were learned. A lot of the tools that students were using, they were having to learn as they were developing and working with each other throughout the duration of the project. The virtual context presents a challenge. Clearly, if you're working with somebody that is from China, for instance, and you're on a completely different time zone, but then again, it can also provide an opportunity to enhance the operation, to make responses more efficient. People have to learn and find new ways to respond more quickly to each other. Trust in any team is absolutely implicitly required, but actually in global virtual teams it can very often take longer to build because you haven't got that face-to-face interaction, so that itself presents a further challenge as far as the student experience is concerned. And leadership and teamwork. Roles were not assigned to the student groups. So, there were leaders who were perhaps self-appointed, emergent leaders, and there are different kind of leadership styles and team roles that will develop as the project progresses. Often those with a mix of emergent and appointed leaders can be found to be most effective. But it's interesting when you look at the results how there can be clear points of difference, I think it's fair to say, when the students experience that themselves. I'll hand you over to Julia. She'll talk about the design methods and results.
Yeah, right. Here's the methodology. It's a mixed method approach. Stage 1, we have access, because we're part of the X-Culture project, we have access to a huge database that the project leader, Vas Taras, at the University of North Carolina, he's sort of been collecting now. It's for about 5 years. So we've got access to that database, which is wonderful. So we collected responses from over 500 post-project evaluation surveys from students who had participated in the X-Culture project previously Data was extracted from open-ended questions that are asked to students at the end of the survey. So we were interested in the qualitative comments that came out from their experience. We used NVivo for that, to extract the data, but we wanted to follow up with our own research from our own students, so we conducted 2 focus groups from a UK university, that's here, and using 5 final year undergraduates. Yeah. So the findings and discussion were divided around the themes that emerged in the literature. Findings were as follows. Yes, to do with teamwork and leadership, leaders and informal leaders are obviously crucial to teams. Here are some of the quotes from the data we extracted from the big survey and from our own responses. Yes, coordinating work and ensuring that the work was of high standard. Some of our students were quite good at that, I have to say. I'm not being biased, but some of our students probably got to grips with some of the teams who were a bit rudderless. The leaders, yes, provide some sort of unity within the group, making sure it all went well. Another comment, I would elect a clear leader in the first instance. I was also make sure that each member's best skills and attributes were exploited when carrying out the work, actually allocating the roles. And I've been more pushy with team members who showed a lack of enthusiasm. That was one of our female students who was trying to kind of keep the team together and keep pushing along. However, some of the groups had no overall team leader. Yes, no one was overall team leader. We're all active on Facebook and we're all equal as partners in the project. Yes, I was not a leader. I participated and gave my opinions, yes, but not a leader. But so there were leadership issues, and towards the end of the project, they had to submit the project, the course for us. For most of them, it's coursework at the end of November, beginning of December. And as the deadline approached, they probably the leaders emerged, I think, then. The next thing was communication. Obviously, this was a challenge, dealing with the different sorts of communication. The students recognised, yes, lack of face-to-face meetings were a problem, and lack of frequent communication was a problem. But they did use a lot of email. They used, these are some of the other comments. I probably insist more on using Skype because from the experience of other teams, it seemed more interactive and build stronger relationships. Some of them had trouble with Facebook, but Facebook tended to be used. This was last year. And the year before as one of the methods of communicating with the team. Yes, it can be terrible in terms of coordinating versions of different documents and tracking group edits. They did try Google Docs, this particular group, but one of the members was very unfamiliar with the technology. So you have got problems with technology across the globe. Language problem, and not such a big problem. I also noticed a lot of spelling mistakes and grammatical errors. The English students perhaps did more to overcome that and for the final report to correct all that. English being my first language meant I could easily understand, however I felt sorry or may have caused some confusion to those people who English was not their first language. Cultural aspects, this was interesting. Positive, yes, I learnt many of the different elements for cross-cultural activities such as leadership, direct communication, or indirect, which is more important within the group. But missed opportunities, spending more time. They'd like to spend more time sharing and talking about their cultures. Yes, they wanted to be less task or report orientated and more people, and wanted to chat more. I will do better than this next time to work with my international friends. Wanted to build social relations. Here's another comment as well. There should be at least 2 persons from the same country. Where you did get European students together, they tended to go together. Just sort of because of cultural affinity. It was quite interesting, the group dynamics. On now to trust, lack of trust, yes, there were problems with trust. I would ask people to redo their work to a high standard rather than me having to redo their work. They didn't trust them, their colleagues. Others I did not understand, did not care and copy and paste as much as they were, which was frustrating, so problems there. Communication is important. There was one person in the group who let us down, so you've got the dysfunctional groups, and I've got 0 minutes, right. Building relationships, I prefer to have one whole session talking with the group, just casual conversation to get to know one another. Right, let's skip on to the next one, conclusions. Right, so overall, looking back, for students it was a positive experience where theory and practice and knowledge works together. the global virtual team roles and leaders, they did emerge. It was interesting how they emerged. Students had to develop resilience to identify and respond to situations and negotiate meaning and solutions to get to their end result. They had to adjust their permission accordingly to communicate with others when things didn't go to plan. Despite frustration, students were able to recognise the positive and negative contributions of this. Overall, this work confirmed that relationships do take longer to build in global virtual teams, but they will frustrate the lack of time to build relationships. The process fostered, though, intercultural empathy and the application of skills reminiscent of the global business world. So they got to know more about cultures. They knew more about, well, they certainly knew more about communication tools than Sarah and I. And Mike Willoughby, who's also involved in teaching this, they're quite adept at harnessing the latest technology, and they recognise, yes, that it's useful to build. They need to build trust and commitment. Okay.
I mean, obviously, in terms of the experience of the people who were teaching this particular module, it became quickly apparent that it was much more a kind of facilitatory type of role that they were adopting. They were involved in the kind of co-creation of knowledge and supporting the students. You know, they had to intervene in instances to perhaps direct them to find solutions. Some people weren't so readily able to do that. They had to be encouraged to do that. And I think that kind of presents all sorts of issues in terms of how we support projects like this going forward. You know, what instruction and guidance that we give to our own staff, not only the students but us as educators as part of this process. And clearly, you know, some of the findings have highlighted that you get, as you do with any group exercise, you get those social loafers. Whether domestically in this setting or internationally in a cross-cultural setting, and we need to be aware of that, and we need to certainly have certain interventions in place to protect students, to support students in those kind of instances. As Julia said, you know, one of the limitations is very much that we've got access to this huge data set, but the findings that we presented today really are from the two focus groups that we ran with our own students in Coventry University, and what we would certainly like to do is develop that further to work with other institutions that are participating in Ex-Culture to take the research forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Any question for Sarah and Julia?
I'm just wondering, are the students assessed on this?
Yeah, good. I thought somebody would raise that. Yes, they are. So they have to write a project as part of their coursework, and Tyrrell in the US, he and all the module tutors, they come up with a marking guide, and a mark is given to the group project, and that counts for 80% of the total coursework mark. And then all the individual lecturers involved in all the individual universities then actually do an individual rating for the student based on their work and their input and what they've shown. So it is a bit of a mix and match, but it does roughly work, and obviously we're working with lecturers from across the world.
Yeah.
So it
is challenging.
Yeah.
There's been quite a lot of dialogue between the team that are participating in the project, where there would be perhaps some points of difference. What somebody would mark at a 60, somebody might mark at a 50. So I think for all of us that are participating in the project, it certainly is an ongoing learning curve to make sure there's that degree of standardisation and valid and fair assessment for our students in particular.
I actually have a question about the fact that you said Facebook and you have Chinese students because they can't access Facebook.
there weren't many Chinese students in the teams.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly it's one of the problems.
And
And that's for Google Docs. I don't think obviously they can't get that either.
And the other thing with assessment, I really find that's the difficulty with me and my project, because in the States and even in Mexico they mark out, they give 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And 80s are pass. And to us, we don't get it. So it's quite difficult to discuss the marking scheme. So
Yes, it is.
for that reason, we decided we do assessment our own way in different places.
Right,
Have you
okay.
found that?
That's why you've got the kind of the sort of agreed principles of assessment that are done
With
by all
VAS
the
and all,
teams,
and
then
then
the
it's sort
individual
of complicated formula for working, and then our own individual mark.
I don't know.